everybody. Can you hear me? All right. Welcome to High Point Historical Society's educational programs. My name is Van Trivet, and I welcome you on behalf of the High Point Historical Society and the High Point Museum. The High Point Historical Society collects, preserves, and showcases the history of Greater High Point to foster a shared appreciation of our community reflected in the stories, events, and traditions of our past. We extend our invitation for you to join our organization. You can see me after the program if you wish to do so. Today, we welcome our presenter, Michael Briggs. Mr. Briggs is a native of Greensboro. He is a collector and scholar of Piedmont, North Carolina decorative arts, including long rifles, powder horns, furniture, North Carolina-made Civil War items, and other local artifacts for over 40 years. He is an author of 7 books over here: Long Rifle Makers of Guilford County, Piedmont, North Carolina Banded Powder Horns and Hunting Bags, Guilford Under the Stars and Bars, Long Rifle Makers of the Rowan School, the Mecklenburg School, the Salem School, and today he's going to talk to us of the Davidson School. Mr. Briggs, we welcome you and thank you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. All right. In the last year and a half has been difficult for all of us. Okay. And I have published 2 books, and yet this is the first time I've been able to go out and talk about them because all the museums have been closed down. So today we're actually going to cover 2 subjects in those 2 books. The Long Rifle Makers of the Salem School was published in July of 2020. And that was, of course, includes the Wachovia track. So that's what we're going to look at first. Then we're going to look at the new book, which came out this summer, the Long Rifle Makers of the Davidson School. And the 2 schools are very similar. There's thought that possibly they worked together at some time, but all the records seem to show that they mostly operated independently. But there certainly was a lot of copying going on and a strong influence between the 2 of them. Okay, those of us that collect and study North Carolina rifles take all of them and divide them into 9 regional styles, 9 areas where a community of people got together and they all worked in the same trade, and over a period of time they developed a regional style. And then everybody in that community made their interpretation, the little flourishes and dressing on it, of what that gun was supposed to look like. So school number 1 is the Bear Creek School. That's largely the Kennedy family in Moore County and the Harper family up here in Chatham County, with a few other people. School number 2 was a group of Quakers right on the Guilford-Randolph County line, and we call that the Early Deep River School. And there were some guys in Guilford that worked in that style and some guys in Randolph and 2 guys even over in Alamance that make guns in that style. That was replaced around between 1800 and 1810 by a group of Quakers in Jamestown, between here in Greensboro. They became by far the largest group in the entire state. I can name 85 men who worked making Jamestown rifles over a 100-year period. And we can thank them for all these other guns being so rare and so valuable because they put them all out of business by the mid-1840s for the most part. Next group that we're going to focus here this morning is the Salem group. That's Moravian gunsmiths who worked in the Wachovia track, and we're going to examine them with a little bit of detail. And then there was also a group of Germans who lived in North Davidson County, and this map over here explains pretty good about where they were. They're not Moravian, and that's the big difference. They're German, but they're Lutheran and Primitive Baptist and even a couple Methodists. So a little bit different heritage there, but they kind of copied each other's work. The next group is the Rowan School, which is basically based in what is today Rowan County, a couple people up in Davie, a couple people down in Cabarrus. Then we have the Mecklenburg School. That's the rarest and most expensive. Today, there are 22 known examples that survive of Mecklenburg rifles. That is all. And they sell for huge money. One sold 10 years ago for $110,000. So, and there's a couple people that lived across the river, the Catawba River, some in Gaston and one in Lincoln. The next group is what we call the Catawba Valley School, mostly Iredell and Catawba County, and then later on, all the way over here in these counties that worked in that style. And then the last group is the Appalachian School. This is a group of mountain gunsmiths, made guns look just like made over the other side of the mountains in Tennessee, but mostly centered in Buncombe and Haywood, okay? Okay, the first group we're going to look at is the Moravians. The Moravians, if you're not familiar, is an early form of Protestant religion. It started in Czechoslovakia. Then for 100 years, they were in Germany. When they first came to America, they were down in Savannah for a little while. That didn't work out well. Then they went up to Pennsylvania and established a number of towns which are survive and are still doing well. Bethlehem, Nazareth, Christian Springs, among those. In 1753, they bought almost 100,000 acres for 500 pounds sterling. And in October of 1753, 15 young single men left and walked down from Pennsylvania and established the Wachovia tract. Their first town, starting in the fall of 1753, was Bethabara. That still exists. You can go visit it today. There's even remains or a recreation of their French and Indian War period stockade that still survives. In 1759, they formed their first open town. Open means you did not have to be a Moravian to live there. There were some Lutherans as well as Moravians in Bethania, 1759. In 1766, they established what for them was their utopian village of Salem. And we're going to talk about them a little bit today. Later on, there were some smaller settlements in Friedland and Friedberg, and even one over in the Clemens area named Hope that we'll look at. This is sort of a map showing you sort of how Bethabara was laid out and what it looked like in the remains of the stockade that's been created. In the 1960s, they did a lot of archaeology work and they found the remains of the gun shop. And that's what we're looking here is the guys doing the digging for that. Now, the Moravians certainly were probably some of the first makers of what we call today long rifles. And that started up in Pennsylvania. And this is one of the most influential rifles. There are some people, Wallace Gussler for one, Bill Ivey and some others, that think maybe this rifle was made down here. There are some other very knowledgeable KRA members that believe this rifle was made in Pennsylvania. I don't know. I don't think that when a gunsmith learned to make a certain style and then moved across the state line that he changed his style automatically. So I don't really know where the gun was made, but this is probably a 1760, 1770 period Moravian rifle. It was published in a book, Rifles of Colonial America. This is rifle number 42. Now, as far as one of the earliest guns that we know of in North Carolina, this gun was bought by the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts in Old Salem. It's on display over there. The bird pecking its tail. This is a German symbol that we see quite a bit called a disselfink. You see it on Proctor art. I've seen it on quilts. I've seen it on a number of things. It's from what I've researched, it's sort of based off the American golden finch. But on rifles, it's always a bird pecking its tail. This, we don't know for sure who made this gun. It is an early, I would say this is a 1780 period rifle with beautiful raised carving. Okay, the first once the 15 Moravians got down here in 1753, they started sending more after that. And they quickly needed somebody to repair their guns when they broke. So in 1754, they sent down a young man named Andreas Betts. He was a trained locksmith, not a gunsmith or a gun stocker, but a locksmith. But they sent him down, and his job was to repair the guns when they broke. And that's what he did. Occasionally, he got a chance to make a gun. There was two interesting quotes when I did my research about him. One of them says, "I've been here 15 months in the gunsmith shop that makes big talk, but in all that time, they've only finished 2 guns." And I think that really was the case. I think they did a lot more time doing gun repair work than they did making new rifles. Betts also ordered 12 barrels. Evidently was making some guns from Will Henry out of Pennsylvania. But the letter says he rejected all 12 of them. He is a peculiar man, you know. In 1764, they sent down a trained gun stocker named John Valentine Beck. 3 years later, he would make a rifle to be presented to the governor of North Carolina, William Tryon. But also in 1764, they found out that Andreas Betts, had secretly engaged himself to the daughter of Rowan gunsmith Henry Bruner, Barbara Bruner, and so they kicked him out of the Moravian church. So he moves to Salisbury, and he buys 2 lots on the town square and opens a gunsmith shop, employing himself and his younger brother George Betts, and a pottery shop selling Salem Moravian pottery on the county square there in Salisbury. One of the young men that is an orphan, born in 1762, is Peter Krause, and he's orphaned in 1770, and the Rowan court bound him to train as a gunsmith under Andreas Betts. This rifle now belongs also to the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts, and it is signed PC on the Patchbox lid, upside down. Guns made in Rowan and Mecklenburg, if they're signed, they're almost always signed on the Patchbox lid. And half of them are upside down, so the man holding the gun can flip it upside down, and now he can read it. So this is the PC rifle, and it's now on display at the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts. In 1759, the Moravians created the town of Bethania. Again, this was an open town. There were in the early 1800s up to the mid-1800s several gun shops there, including a water-powered barrel boring mill that belonged to Herman Butner. He later had 3 sons that worked as gunsmiths. Also, Elias Schaub worked over there. Again, as I said, in 1766, they created their utopian village of Salem. This is a famous painting by Ludwig Gottfried von Redken, and it shows several of the buildings in that survive today in Salem. We're so blessed and lucky to have this. Most people don't know it. Almost all of Colonial Williamsburg is a recreation. Most of Salem is original. That's what really makes this so wonderful. One of the buildings, this building here on the top, this is the Mine House, which that's where the Moravian minister lived. And if you were a Moravian and were traveling here from one of the other towns or from Pennsylvania, you could stay there. Only Moravians could stay there. We have a powder horn in this case over here on the end with that image engraved on the powder horn. And also an exposed timber house, a Salem powder horn, one of the earliest pieces of Moravian decorative art to me. Okay, when I was doing the research, and I found a whole trove of wonderful things in the archives at Old Salem, I discovered this map. John Bivens was a friend of mine for years. Gosh, I wish I could go ask him, why didn't he use this in his book? because the map was wonderful. And when I started looking at it, I then discovered it didn't have any of these labeling on it. Kenneth Orr helped me put all these graphics with it. But not only was every house in Salem in 1840 on it, but every gun shop. So when they first opened gun shops in Salem, they were in the Single Brothers house, this building right here. And this is where Valentine Beck had his shop, starting in like 1770. And then Jacob Roche Jr. had his shop there in 1780. And then Christoph Vogler originally had his shop there when Vogler took over in 1787. He quickly decided, though, after 2 years, he didn't want to work for the Moravian Church. And the way everything was set up, the Moravian Church owned everything. You owned nothing. You were there to serve God. So the Moravian Church supplied your house, your clothes, your food, all your worldly needs. But when something was sold, the money went to the church, not to you. So Christoph told him after a couple of years he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted his own tools and his own gun shop. He wanted to own it. So they let him set up in this little building right over here. And this was his gun shop until 1797 was there. There's a building there today, a small little building. It's like this place for kids to stand when they catch the school bus when it's not raining. You know what I'm talking about, Tom? It's right off Main Street. There's just a little hut-looking thing built there for kids to stay out of the weather in to catch the school bus or something. That's about where that site is, was kind of what we figured out. In 1797, Vogler gets married, and he builds what is that time is the most expensive house in Salem. And he puts a gun shop in the basement of it. That house still stands. It still has a gun sign hanging off the front of the house. He lived there for 3 years and decided he couldn't afford it. So he had to move out and sell it. And he moved over here to what it was then known as the Christian Loesch House. It's where the old Salem Visitor Center, the new Visitor Center, is today. Then the next year he asked for permission to build a water-powered barrel boring mill and gun shop on Town Run Creek. And this was done. He worked here the rest of his life until he died in 1827. His oldest son, Nathaniel Vogler, worked with him and then took over the gun shop in 1827. There's only one signed Nathaniel Vogler rifle known. We're going to look at it. It's absolutely fabulous. But I was surprised he's still working as a gunsmith all the way up until his death in 1873. Why don't we ever see more guns by him? I don't know. Christoph's youngest son is Timothy Vogler, born 1806. And he, excuse me, get back here. Okay. In 1831, he builds his own gun shop. That building was restored about 20 years ago. It's closed right now due to the pandemic, but soon I hope will be reopened. And it's the oldest gun shop in America, run by Blake Stevenson and his group. Timothy built the house next door to it. There was another man that, I've got a beautiful rifle here by today, George Foltz. Foltz was born a Moravian in 1797, grew up in the town, apprenticed under Christoph up here, and in 1816, he worked for Christoph for a year and a half. Then he got into trouble. He got into what is termed a drunken brawl with an outsider at Salem Tavern on Christmas Day, and he was expelled from the church and the town. He went down to Davidson County. We don't know with who, but he moved in and worked with one of the Davidson gunsmiths, which we're going to talk about today. Then a year and a half later came back and apologized and was allowed to come back and live in his parents' house, and then built a gun shop next door almost across the street from Timothy's shop. I found later where John Bibbins, and we'll see it, made a sketch of what that gun shop. And I wonder, how did that gun shop hasn't existed in 100 years? How do you know what it looked like? Well, he took it off this map. Exactly how he knew what it looked like. Okay, this is one of only 2 or 3 known signed rifles by Christoph Vogler. It's a beautiful Eagle Patchbox in silver. I love the serpent. and the eagle carrying its meal. Short one-screw tank, which is something that will change over a period of years. Signed on the barrel, C. Vogler, Salem, NC. There's one other rifle known with a silver plate like that, and then one stamped C. Vogler. Until 5 years ago, I would have told you there were no race car rifles made by the Voglers. This rifle showed up in North Davidson County. Old Salem and Mazda purchased it. It hasn't been properly restored. I hope that changes. But it is a fantastic Eagle Patchbox gun with beautiful relief carving. Christoph Vogler, only one known. It needs a proper restoration. Christoph had two young nephews. John would go on to become a gunsmith and, more importantly, a silversmith, and is famous for his silver work. I have 5 eagleback spoons made by him in my collection. And this is a picture of he and his wife. This is his house. This house still stands and belongs to Old Salem, and it's open as part of the tour. The building beside it was the shop he used with himself and his son Elias, both for gun work and for silver work. This building no longer exists. This building does. This is the remains of Christoph Vogler House, and right now there's a rifle up there, and you went down the steps on the side to get into the gun shop. This beautiful rifle was made in 1807. For the time, it's the most expensive rifle I've ever seen made in that time period anywhere. This gun sold for $125 in 1807, which is just an astronomical amount. It was made as a presentation piece for the chief of scouts for Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. And it survives in just fantastic condition. It is beautiful silver eagle patch box, fantastic engraving. This is actually another, it's got a bird face on it. So this is the work of John Vogler. There's the eagle face. Here's another rifle. I don't think he made it, but I think he did the engraving on it. This is his son Elias. He made a gun for his son also. This is a friend of mine's collection in Old Salem. It says E.A. Vogler owned the Patchbox Lid. Nathaniel is Christoph's oldest son. He made this beautiful rifle. A friend of mine, Dr. Glenn Bryan, owns this. Glenn was a doctor for many years in Melbourne, Florida. And he had a patient who was an old German man. And he got to talking to the guy one day, and the guy actually came in his office and saw this gun and read the plaque and started laughing and told Glenn, "You don't know what this is." Come to find out, the man had been a tank commander for the Wehrmacht. Was captured, fortunately for him, by the Americans, not the Russians. Was sent to a POW camp in Florida. When the war was over, he got out, married a local girl, and never went back to Germany. And he said, "You don't understand what this is." And he said, "Well," he said, "the name Vogler in German means bird keeper. You handle the eagle or hawk or falcon for the local count, and that's your job. And you would either have a leather perch on your arm or a special hat with a leather perch on top of it so the bird of prey could come land on your head." And that's what we see here. Look at the file work. These to me, and I collect furniture, I collect silver, I collect textiles, I collect it all. But to me, some of North Carolina's greatest decorative art items, and We've got an expert on decorative arts here in Leland Little. I think you would have to agree, this is some of the best ever made in North Carolina. Even an eagle on each of the side plates. Now, this has a biblical verse engraved on it. The seed of the woman hath bruised the serpent head, taken from Genesis 3, verse 15. Nathaniel Vogler, Salem, NC, only known sign gun by him. This is Timothy Vogler's gun shop. Again, it's still there, not open today, but hopefully will be open again after the first of the year. Built in 1831. That's Timothy and his wife. This is a signed Timothy Eagle Patchbox Gun. This is another one, not signed. Colonial Williamsburg bought this gun last year, paid $45,000 for it. Timothy had 2 daughters. He made one a rifle for Christmas, made the other one a shotgun. These are still in the collection at Old Salem. This is the hand-drawn sketch that John Bibbins made of George Foltz's gun shop, made off of the picture from that map. This is the gun sign that used to hang on the outside of the shop. And I have this beautiful rifle that's here today. Okay, so now we're going to get in why I'm supposed to be here. The Davidson School. This is a map that I was able to put together last year with the help of the people in mapping at Davidson County. And you'll see most of all of these gun shops are up here on the top of the map. So this is northern Davidson County, less than 10 miles from Old Salem. Henry Ledford, we're going to talk about him today. We're going to talk about the Long family. Andrew Long was one of the most important gunsmiths. He had 2 nephews or cousins, Felix Long and Solomon Long. They were brothers. From where they were, all 3 of them, you could throw a rock and hit Bethany Church. They're all within 200 yards of Bethany Church, if you know where that is. We're going to talk about Solomon Farrington today. We're going to talk about James L. Smith. He's the blacksmith that made the triggers for all these guys. Barnabas Weir, okay, found where his land deed was. We have one of his descendants here today. Benjamin Merrill, and then John Jarrett. I think it was very likely, certainly in the 1760, 70, 70 period, some gunsmiths working in Davidson County. If so, we can't find any documentation of it. The only guy we could find is Merrill, and he is listed as a gunsmith. Unfortunately, he got caught up in a group called the Regulator Movement. Okay, these were people who lived in the backcountry and got no benefit from living there from the state of North Carolina. The state of North Carolina wasn't building bridges or roads, operating schools or anything for these people in the backcountry. So they said, why should we pay taxes? We shouldn't have to. If you're not going to give us anything, we shouldn't have to pay you. Well, Governor Tryon didn't agree with that, and he raised an army, and he came, and they fought a little battle over here just outside of Burlington, and they lost. And he was one of 5 people captured, taken to Hillsboro, tried, found guilty, ordered to be hung, but before dead, taken down, his body opened up, his heart taken out and burned in front of him, and cut off all 4 limbs and sent them to different parts of the states as an example. So pretty gruesome way to go, hung, drawn, and quartered. So that's what happened to Benjamin Merrill. There are no surviving guns. I don't know if he made military guns, long rifles, or what he made. The oldest guy that I know about, born in 1774, is Solomon Farrington. He's right here, just off his lands on Abbott's Creek. And there's one rifle by him that survives. I own it. It's here today for you to look at. It is signed. Beautiful Eagle Patchbox Gun. What's unusual, the eagle's body is brass, but his head is made out of silver. The Davidson School copied the stock architecture and the eagle patchbox design from Salem. Now, John Bivens wrote in his 1968 book, Longrifles of North Carolina, he thought that it's very possible that Henry Ledford and Andrew Long came and apprenticed under Christoph in Old Salem. There is nothing in the Moravian records that document that. Although there are many records that show they were forever, the governing body in Salem, the collegium, is forever having to yell at Christoph for bringing outsiders and working them in the gun shop. Seldom does it name who those people were. So we don't really know for sure. This house was photographed by Kenneth Orr. This is Henry Ledford's house. Stood right on Highway 109 on the west side of the road, just south of Abbott's Creek, which is where Henry Ledford's shop was. This is the earliest known example of a Henry Ledford rifle, and having studied this gun, there's an awful lot of Old Salem in this gun, more than there is Davidson. So I could see why this rifle's in a private collection in South Carolina, one I would dearly love to have. Signed HL upside down on the patchbox lid. Again, when he would have started, there would have been no Davidson County. He was working in Rowan. He was just in the part of Rowan that was east of the river. Race carved with an eagle. Now, again, these people weren't Moravian. They're Lutherans, and Henry's buried at what was a Lutheran church. It's now a Church of Christ cemetery. They put a group of symbols on their guns that I don't see on guns made by anybody else anywhere. And there's a chapter on this in my book. What is this? What does this mean? There's too many of them, of these unusual symbols on these Davidson rifles for them not to have had a meaning. Nobody today has been able to tell me what they stand for. This obviously looks like a woman, and I put this out on the internet on some gun sites, and one guy wrote me and said, he said she's covered, which in some things means she's under the protection of the Almighty. Another one said that, that there was a lot of Masonic interest at that time, and that this could be some form of Masonic symbol. Now let's go back here to the Solomon Farrington gun I forgot to show you. Look at this symbol. What is this? Very similar. Is that the tree of life? Again, I see these symbols again and again on Davidson rifles, and I don't see them on guns by anybody anywhere else. So I don't know what they stand for. This is a fabulous rifle I just was able to get last year. It's over here on display. This is Henry Ledford, made for G.W. Jones, the genealogist. I asked for help, wasn't able to figure out who this guy is. I told her, his name's probably George Washington Jones. It's going to be my guess, but we haven't located him yet. This rifle's all silver mounted, absolutely beautiful. Here's another one. This rifle was made for a man who lived in Thomasville by the name of Samuel Myers. He had Henry Ledford build this rifle for him in 1838. The High Point Museum, in their gun case downstairs, has 4 Henry Ledford rifles. 2 half stocks with silver and 2 full stock rifles. This is a fabulous rifle I found about 5 years ago and sold it to an antique dealer in Lexington. I sold another one almost identical to this one to Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts. This rifle here, I believe, is the one that's downstairs. This rifle is at the Atlanta History Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. They've never heard of Henry Ledford. They had no idea what it was, so I came in and found it and saw it. I also found one in the lobby on display at the Bob Bullock State Texas History Museum in Austin. Again, they've never heard of Henry Ledford. They just knew who carried the rifle and used it at San Jacinto. So these things got around. And to show you how they got around, we have in a case here This is a relic found on 1942 in Pikes Peak in Colorado. Henry and his wife, Catherine, are both buried next to each other at Bethany Church Cemetery. Now, the other most prominent gunsmith who worked in Davidson County, again, right up at Bethany Church, is Andrew Long. And I was able to get this wonderful rifle that's here on display 2 years ago. Now, I shouldn't have skipped over this stuff. What is this balanced on the eagle's head? Because if you'll notice on rifle after rifle, what is this? There's too many of these. What does it stand for? Again, I've found 8 different rifles by different makers in Davidson County. You never see that on a Moravian gun. It had to have had some meaning to them. Doesn't mean anything to us today, but it had to have some meaning to them. So that's one of the chapters in my book. I tell you what the different things I've been told, but I don't really know how to answer the question. Now, Davidson rifles and Salem rifles. There are many of them, and there's some in the back of the Davidson book. I can't tell you if it's a Salem or Davidson gun. I don't know. They've blurred the line so much. The one thing I look for, first thing I look for, if I handed an unsigned rifle that has the architecture that's either Davidson or Salem, I look at the barrel tang. The barrel tang is this little metal strap here. In both cases, Salem and Davidson, it's usually going to be 3 to 4 inches long, and we'll have 2 screws. But I look at how it terminates, the end of it here. Davidson rifles, it always comes down and then goes to a narrow point. Go back here and find the Salem one. Should have done this while I was there. Forgot about it. Okay, we'll find it here in just a second. All right. The only difference, this looks, unless you really study it, but you see the little indent right here? That is a Vogler barrel tang. That's all I can tell. Sometimes, and then also how they terminated their 4-stock moldings. And I see guns that it has one signed from one school and then one from another. So when I study that, I have no idea what I'm looking at. But that's the main thing I look at to tell me is the gun made in Salem or made in Davidson if it's not signed by the maker. Okay, all right. Here's another beautiful rifle I used to own, made by Andrew Long. Beautiful Eagle Patchbox Gun. This gun was purchased at an estate sale in Burke County, just outside of Morganton. There's that Davidson barrel tang. No indent. Got the man in the moon. Love the galouche work on the toe plate. Here's another one with all galouche work. This gun's in a private collection in South Carolina. Fabulous Andrew Long rifle. Again, man in the moon and a hunter star. Comparing the two by the same shop, same hand. This rifle turned up just a couple years ago. An antique auctioneer friend of mine found this and brought it over, and Bill Ivy bought it and had it restored, and I bought it from Bill. It's a 3/4 scale boys rifle. So just in every way, it's there, but it's just tiny. I love the Christian fishes on both sides of the stock. And it's the only known signed rifle by Felix Long that survives. Felix Long, 1844, with silver plate. There's another subset of rifles. It could be the Wer family. And since we have a Wer descendant here, there's no signed Wer rifles that survive. But I have seen rifles with different style patch boxes. I know are Davidson, but I don't know who made them. I've seen 4 of them, 3 of them I got pictures of and include them all in the book. This one has an Edelweiss patch box, Edelweiss flower from the Alps, and a full eagle side plate, Davidson barrel tang. This one has a pinwheel, not quite a Filfot, which is a German symbol for infinity. And here's another one with a flowered. So I don't know who made these 3 rifles. Again, these could be Wers, could be somebody else. I don't know. I think there's a relationship between them. And then we have a group of rifles with disselfinks on them. Antique and house restored Bob Pearl. I know you know Bob. He owns this one. I think this was made by one of the Long family, but I don't know if it's Felix or Solomon. But it has a disselfink. And here's an earlier version of a Davidson disselfink. Now, in addition to doing gun work, the families of this same group of men also worked in the decorative art field. This is a John Swicegood School corner cupboard. I just bought this at auction just a couple months ago. So this is something I had looked for years and found one. We know now that the Swicegood School was actually started by a group of family, the Clodfelters, which came down in the 1760s. There were 3 Clodfelter cabinet makers that worked in this style. This is all North Davidson County, just outside of Midway. One of them then trained John Swicegood. He trained another Clodfelter and also a Jonathan Long. Jonathan Long's brothers were Felix Long and Solomon Long. So everybody's all interrelated in doing this stuff. They not only made furniture, they were famous for taking the Filfot and taking the petals off and putting them in different corners of some of their decorative furniture. Here's a chest of drawers, again with those commas in the corners, Filfot petals. But then they also did something else. Davidson County, and I know Penn Wood did an article on these a long time ago. I think I found a copy of it somewhere, Penn. There's 100 pierced tombstones at least 6 different cemeteries in Davidson County. There's nothing like this anywhere else in the world. And I went and photographed all 100 of them and put them all in the back of that book, along with the furniture and the stories of the people that did it. And the same people that are making the furniture are the ones carving the tombstones. One of them is signed. So, and if you'll notice, look at the architecture at the top. See any similarity? Isn't that wonderful? This is the back of that same tombstone. This one's at Abbott Creek Primitive Baptist Church. Ken, did you put the historical marker up there? Okay, I thought. Okay, that's what I thought. This one is also at Abbott's Creek Primitive Baptist Church, and it's a young child that died, and his name was Josiah Spurgeon. There's a famous Spurgeon house that still stands just down the street from that. And on the back of that tombstone, it says, made by the hand of Joseph Clodfelter. That's how we know who made it. Some of these have no English on them at all. They're all still written in German. You'll find them at Bethany Church also, and there's 6 different churches that have these tombstones. Most of them have Filfots, and there's different kinds of Filfots. There's some with 3 petals, some with 4, some with 5. Again, it's a symbol for infinity. In many of these cases, it's a positive Filfot means that the Filfot itself is there and with holes carved around it. That's a negative Filfot. You can see the difference. But this is just, again, this is something unique to our area. And to me, because it was all the families of the people that were making the guns are also carving the tombstones and making the furniture, that needs to be part of it. It was all part of Davidson Decorative Arts. Any questions? Yes. Everybody, so everybody can hear you.
We've got some people listening online.
So one question I have is in regards to the wood of the stock. It appears a lot of maple
That,
as opposed to walnut, which we find in guns, shotguns made today.
pretty much the 8 schools in Piedmont, North Carolina, almost always use maple. Occasionally, you'll find a Jamestown with a walnut stock. I've even seen a Salem rifle with a walnut stock, but that's very unusual. 99% are going to be maple. The guns made up in the Appalachian school that I talked about, the group in Buncombe and Haywood and up in the mountains, they're almost always walnut. But occasionally you'll find a maple stock up there, but that's not the rule. When you get done, come up and just take a look at a few things. Here's that map that I showed you over here. In this case is the powder horn with the Gamine house and an exposed timber house beside it from Salem in there. This is a beautiful Eagle box rifle by George Vogler. This one is George Foltz, Christoph Vogler, and a Disselfink rifle made by George Vogler. Here's the little boy's rifle by Felix Long. This is the only known sign, Solomon Farrington. This is Andrew Long, and this is Henry Ledford. And then we've got the remains of that. So when we're done, you're welcome to come up and look at that. If any of you want to get a book, all 7 of my books are over here and are available. Ladies, if you got a husband or son or male relative that's hard to shop for Christmas, these are always a good Christmas gift. But any other questions? Yes, it's in the Salem book. Okay, yeah, he is one of the early cabinet makers, actually trained by the Clodfelters, and he's the one that trained John Swice.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Mordecai Collins, extremely important.
Yeah,
I got a signed chest by him that came out of the Swice Goods sale August of 1983, and a corner covered by Swice Good came out of the same sale.
Right.
Right.
He's the only one that's not German by descent.
So Michael, this Bianchi Salem trigger lock maker, he got thrown out of the church. He married outside the church. He went over to Salisbury.
Andreas Betts.
Betts, thank you. And he was connected to the Bruners over in
He marries Barbara Bruner, which is what gets him kicked out of the Moravian church.
For marrying outside the church.
Right, and he buys 2 lots, and the deeds are talked about in the Rowan book. I'll show you exactly where they were. He then has 2 lots on the town square in Salisbury, and he opens a gun shop in one, employing himself and his younger brother and Peter Krause, who we talked about today, who's an orphan who's bound to him by the court. And he runs the gun shop, but he also has a shop selling pottery. And there's multiple records of Gottfried Aust and Rudolph Christ taking Salem pottery down to Betts to sell at the store in Salisbury. Salisbury, to me, is the most important English-speaking trading post in colonial period time in North Carolina. Salem, totally German. And so the Scotch-Irish that have infiltrated the western part of the Piedmont, they would have been much more likely to go and buy and do their trading in Salisbury than they would have come to Salem.
So there were 3 generations of these Bruners, and I know John Bivens thought highly of all 3.
We just finally recently discovered a 3rd signed Bruner rifle. Okay, Henry Bruner. but we attribute all three of them to Henry Bruner III. The best one is at Old Salem, is at Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts.
So this is interesting. I talked to Gary Freeze, doctor at Catawba College recently, and he said, I was talking about the Old English Cemetery, and West Harris is buried in Governor Ellis's plot. And West Harris Sr. was married to Edith Ledbetter, and he was at Brandywine, he was at Valley Forge with Washington, probably had a Bruner rifle. And the third generation of these Bruners that lived right on the river in Salisbury, he was a early maker, Jacob was, but he's buried in the Governor Ellis's plot. But he also founded the Carolina Watchman newspaper, which he started working there when he was 8, and he ran it for 50 years, the third oldest newspaper in North Carolina. And this is Jacob Bruner, and he's buried in our Civil War Governor Ellis's plot. So when I talked to Gary Freeze and I was talking about Edith Ledbetter married to West Harris, he said, if you are related to West Harris, you go back to the Tudor line.
Wow.
He did this famous book, The Catawbans.
Right. Thank you. There's almost no question in my mind that Daniel Boone, of course, moved to North Carolina when he was just a child with his parents. His parents, Squire and Nancy, are both buried in Knoxville. And when he went through the Cumberland Gap the first time, he was carrying a Rowan rifle, very possibly a Bruner. That would almost been definite, because that would have been the trading post that his family would have used that he grew up with. So, I mean, he grew up 13 miles from Salisbury. So.
And Colonel West Harris was at Valley Forge, and there's a good chance he was carrying a Bruner rifle.
Very possibly.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Oh, yeah, let's use the mic. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, early on in your presentation, you mentioned the fact that someone said that they only built 2 rifles in a period of time, a long period of time. How long would it take to build a rifle? Would they do it from scratch, or would they buy parts and assemble it?
In the early days, like Andreas Betts is who we're talking about, and working over in Bethabara, he had to make everything from scratch. So we're talking hand hammering the barrel, doing the welding, making the lock, the triggers, stocking the gun, any decoration is on it, all the mountings, the butt plate, trigger guard, all the things on it. You could be talking as much as 400 hours of work to make one gun.
Well,
But they're also, probably 95% of his time was spent repairing existing guns that were broken, okay? And very little time making new guns. And that's what that letter alluded to. That guy had been there for 15 months in Bethabara, and they said the gun shop makes big noise, but in all the 15 months I've been here, they've completed 2 rifles.
well, is there an example anywhere in North Carolina that would be could be a working shop? In other words, is the equipment still available to see?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how the rifling was
Salem
put in.
opens it again. The Timothy Vogler shop, built in 1831, is still there, the original building, and they've recreated everything inside. We have one of the gunsmiths here with us today who works in that shop. Okay, so believe me, I know I couldn't make anything. I'm the guy that I get up and talk about stuff. Okay, that's my gift. That, and I document it and write books about it. I have no idea how you make any of this stuff, but this guy does. He does it. He does it. He worked in that shop for many years, as a matter of fact. So please come up and talk to him. If you want to get a book, yes, go ahead. Yes, they have a rifling machine in that shop. Right. If you want to come up and get a book, I'll be glad to sign one for you or autograph it or personalize it if you want to do that. And please take your time and look at this. Does the museum have anything y'all want to say before I finish? Okay, sure.
Are all the rifles, Michael, that ornate? Or just people who could afford to buy the ones that ornate?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are all of them that decorative?
No. As a matter of fact, the majority probably were not that decorative. The majority of the guns made, I think, and I always refer to them as meat and tater guns,
Right.
were very plain. And for the most part, they got used up and don't survive.
I was going to say, for the Revolutionary War, they couldn't have manufactured them fast enough.
Nobody ever fell out of a tree deer hunting with this. Okay? This, this gun, this is over $20,000 here just on one gun. Okay, so I mean, these are some of the great decorative art pieces. I'm going to ask you, if you would, if somebody wants to see the back of them, would you please pick it up and be the one to handle it? Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you for such a wonderful turnout.
Thank you,
I hope
Mr.
enjoyed
Briggs.
yourself.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.